we started to look at the workplace of the future at Next Nature. We were doing this in collaboration with the Marina Terrain, looking to do some living labs and some experiments there. But when you're looking at the future, often you have to start by looking at the past. So we really wanted to have a quick look at what the history of the office really was. And it obviously has always been evolving. So if you look back to the 1900s, when it sort of came about first, it was this factory for information, essentially. And that then worked over time into the 50s, where you had this open office. And then the rise of the IT revolution essentially brought us into the cubicles. And then finally, we have the creative kind of flex offices in the 2000s. So it really brings us to today, where, the office is not really working for everyone. So we see that 78% of employees are sitting down most of the time, which we know is not really healthy for our bodies. 35% of employees are actually taken sick due to stress. So the environment is really not encouraging us in our mental health either. And the latest research shows that obviously there is a big shift towards employees wanting to work partly from home or even full-time from home, or have this sort of hybrid system. So the question we arrive at is, do we still need the office? And so we started looking at this from an employee perspective of, to have happy and productive employees, you need three things. You need autonomy, which means, you have the power to essentially live your life and sort of have control over it. You need this relatedness, so this feeling of belonging to a bigger organization, a bigger tribe, a bigger culture. And you need competence, which means you need to be able to get on with your work and have kind of deep focus and mastery over it. And so here you see that at the home, it's very easy to have autonomy. We can have control over our lives, but it's a lot harder to feel related and connected to someone sitting at home. And again, it's hard to find that focus for some people, especially in houses that, are busy, to have that. So the argument for us, or our hypothesis, is that the office is still very much needed, but it needs to be redesigned for those functions of relatedness and competence. Looking at some of the workplace trends over time, we did a big kind of study around it, and we saw 5 key pillars, one being wellness and safety. So we're seeing a lot more offices being designed around actually encouraging people to move more. We're also seeing the rise in places to sort of pause and reflect and actually have space to unwind and relax. Obviously, with the coronavirus, we're seeing more and more kind of safe and sanitized spaces where employees can clean themselves, or maybe the buildings can actually self-clean. And obviously, if you look at a lot of the data, this kind of revolution in green architecture or greening offices obviously has a really strong link to our mental health. And the greener it is, the happier we are. Something that we think is really important as well is this idea of community-centered. And a community can be within a company and within an organization, but it can also be within the stakeholder network that you operate within. So we're seeing more interest in sharing resources or assets with others, which also helps with the business models. How do you actually foster these communities? What new rituals might emerge? We're obviously seeing kind of the weak signals of that currently. I think, again, maximizing spaces, you look at the alternative uses of offices. They're not just there from 9 to 5. The buildings are there 24/7. So what should we actually be doing with them that can support the community built around them? And finally, food tends to bring people together at lunchtime, and we miss that somewhat, but it's a good way to bring diverse cultures together and sit at this big table. Here is something at Next Nature we really focus on having humane technologies. And what we mean by that is that technologies shouldn't be in charge of us, but they should actually be empowering us to do the jobs that we need to do. And so there are multiple ways in which this manifests, whether it's kind of interfacing anywhere and everywhere. I think a lot of businesses are sort of struggling to get to the bottom of how can you collaborate really effectively whilst being remote. So how are the more fluid ways that might emerge? having sentient spaces. We're getting more used to this now in the homes, that we have these kind of IoT smart devices, or we have we have Amazons or Googles to sort of shout at, and they do what we command them to do. But can we also bring that into the office space? Connecting with colleagues. We're all doing this remotely currently, but it's still at a kind of medium fidelity. And what's the sort of high fidelity version of that? Should we be in VR currently? And is the technology there to support us to really connect emotionally together? And also this idea of unifunctionality. I don't know about everyone else here, but I often have 50 browser tabs open at any given time, as well as 7 or 8 productivity apps running. And that's actually not all that productive. So how can we scale it down and make sure that we're focusing on the task in hand instead of being bombarded by all of these different messages? The next big trend we're seeing is in enriching environments. So this is around sort of creating better environments for the human body, whether that's being able to sort of simulate or create your own spaces, whether that's looking at using natural light in a more effective way, whether that's even making spaces more somatosensory, which essentially means more tangible. A lot of offices aren't necessarily designed for you to kind of touch and feel, even though we know that that's really important from an emotional standpoint for us to be happy and productive. I think soundscaping, we're in the early days of, how do we make sure that these offices can support multiple people stacking on top of each other in dense environments whilst keeping kind of privacy. And the final one, which I think is one of the most important ones actually, is this idea of flexible resilience. And when we're talking about resilience, it's about sustainability over time. So it's not, it shouldn't be a brittle environment that has to be, that can't put up with the changes that's thrust upon it, and it needs to be able to adapt over a long period of time. So not just this year or next year, but 10 years, 50 years, 100 years. So this idea of liquid spaces that can sort of morph and merge and flow with the needs of the people using it, I think is a really interesting one. We also think there's a lot still to learn from nature, and looking at it from a biophilic design point of view, what can we learn not only in the materiality, but what can we learn from wild systems? We often have very impermeable offices, so you're either in or you're out of it. But is there an in-between? Is there something that's kind of breathable in a way, and that could also help clean and keep keep things out, but also let them in? And finally, with the idea that an office can be one space, but can we extend that office, and what's the minimum viable office that we can imagine? Is it just a laptop these days, or is it more than that? So we kind of took a lot of these trends and these weak signals, and we tried to create a few different solutions for them, essentially. And I wanted to share a few of them based on our research. So one of the big themes here is really about relatedness, right? And connecting to one another. So here we're really focusing on creating workplaces with shared spaces for this connectivity. And it's then really about inclusivity, and also providing wellness. So we talk less about sort of safety and more about wellness, because it's a bigger picture. So instead of you going to the co-working space, perhaps you're actually going to the co-working spa. This is where you might meet a colleague who is also maybe a bit stressed by today's tasks, but needs a place to go where it's a bit quieter. It has some natural light, some smells, a relaxing atmosphere, essentially, to unwind, to then come back to connecting with a colleague, and even, still getting some work done there, but in the most serene way possible. We've also been experimenting with trying to bring more equality to the interactions that we have digitally. So if some people are in an office environment and other people are not, there tends to be a discrepancy between the two. So if you have 5 people on a call and 1 person in the office, there's an imbalance there, and vice versa. So this is the call tower that tries to bring people on a more level playing field where everyone is looking at a singular point, but those in the room can use the mirror to still make eye contact with other people in the room, whereas those calling from outside the room can be seen on the display up above. So everyone is focused on each other and really creating that human interaction and touch point. Of course, not all ideas need to be completely technologically focused. And I think one of them that we were interested in sort of bringing back is this idea from the 70s where you see these conversation pools. And here then we envision people not necessarily using technology in them, but sitting one-on-one next to each other or across from each other and having kind of deep conversations about what's going on within the office environment and sort of brainstorming within those spaces. Finally, we wanted to bring back the virtual coffee moments. So we know that it's important to have this serendipity within the office, but it's very difficult to sort of get within the online world. So could we sort of create a bot that would help pair up your colleagues in a random way to spark that kind of that connectivity, which you find in the office space, but you don't necessarily find online. So can you just meet together in an online room, but still have that sort of encounter otherwise? Now, a few of these rooms are really centered on unifunctionality. So it's about focused rooms that are both activity-based and also they're really driven by emotions. So we imagine a suite of different cabins or rooms whereby you would choose what emotional state you were in at the time and then pick the room that suits that emotional state. So if you're not feeling so well and you need cheering up, you would go into a positive room. Whereas if you were maybe already feeling too, high up on it, then you might go for a kind of neutral room to calm you down again. A couple examples of this: if you were stepping in by yourself to one of these rooms, they would kind of be soundproofed. And so for the positive mood, if you were to go into the video calling, you'd kind of clamber over these rocks where this arm would sweep around you so you could keep on the video call whilst the backgrounds kind of changed. And this is kind of in the positive mood, but if you were to go in there in a negative way, what we'd want to do is kind of release some of that negativity. And so we created this more spongy, squeezy environment that would help you to kind of de-stress a lot of that on the phone while you kind of walk around and, you can punch the sides of things. For the positive mood-focused room, here we're really looking at sort of getting all your thoughts out onto the page. And so the whole room becomes a page that you can draw all over and externalize your thoughts, helping you to kind of capture it in an environment. Whereas the negative mood, if you wanted to focus, we have this, essentially this hot tub that people can sit in and let the negative mood kind of flow through them and past them using the water to kind of calm people down. For the positive inspiration cabin, you want to go a bit crazier here. So we have some dressing up equipment in there. We don't see any seats in there though. It's more of a standing room where you can play with the furniture and you can get really inspired by your surroundings. Whereas the negative one, maybe there's bunnies in there. Maybe you need that much uplifting that we need to bring other animals into the space to kind of even you out. But it could also be that even the walls start to kind of massage you. So these are just a number of different solutions that we have to having kind of an emotional activity-based space. But I think in conclusion, I'd still very much argue, and we do at Next Nature, that the office or these third spaces are very much needed because we still have to relate and connect to one another in these physical spaces for our organizational cultures to really thrive and take off. And we need these optimized spaces that give us the focus that we desperately need to do the good work that we need to get done. Thank you very much.